Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to absolutely dismantle everything you thought you knew about procrastination. For decades, society has told us to just, buy a better planner, set an alarm, or simply try harder. But research from the last decade has completely reframed this habit, proving once and for all that procrastination is not a time management issue. It's actually an emotional one. So let's dive right into this and replace all that guilt with some neuroscience. If procrastination isn't laziness, then what is it exactly? What is literally happening inside your brain when you actively avoid a task you know you need to do, even when you know perfectly well that avoiding it is going to cause you massive stress later on?
Section 1. The myth of laziness and why it's not a time problem. For decades, the old belief was just that you were bad at managing your time, or let's be honest, that you were just lazy. But groundbreaking research by psychologists Fuchsia Saros and Tim Peichel gives us this completely new paradigm. Procrastination is actually an emotion regulation strategy. It's a mechanism your brain uses to dodge negative emotions. So it's not a productivity failure at all. It's a coping mechanism for your feelings. And the official clinical definition makes this incredibly clear. It's defined as the voluntary delay of an intended action despite expecting to be worse off as a result. The absolutely crucial word there, voluntary. You aren't simply forgetting to do the task, and you definitely aren't incapable of doing it. You are consciously choosing to put it off because of the bad feelings the task brings up, even though you fully know it's going to hurt you later. Which brings us to Section 2, the emotion regulation trap, and avoiding bad feelings.
You see, we avoid tasks when they trigger specific feelings. Things like boredom, anxiety, self-doubt, resentment, or frustration. If a task is ambiguous, like you don't even know where to begin, or if it just lacks personal meaning to you, your brain literally sounds an emotional alarm. This perfectly explains why you might suddenly decide to aggressively clean your entire house instead of starting that frustrating spreadsheet. That right there is called task substitution. Your brain is just desperately looking for a way to feel productive without having to face the negative emotions of the actual difficult task. Now, this introduces a super fascinating psychological glitch known as temporal discounting. This is basically our built-in human tendency to systematically value present rewards, like scrolling on our phones or watching just one more episode of a show, way more than future rewards. Actually, it's kind of crazy. Your brain practically treats your future self as a totally fictional person. You are happily handing this complete stranger all the stress and the late nights, while your present self just kicks back and enjoys the short-term relief.
All right, Section 3, your brain on procrastination and its neurological impacts.
Now, this might genuinely surprise you. When we look at chronic procrastinators, we actually see structural differences in the brain, specifically differences in the amygdala, which is the part that processes our emotions, and we see reduced white matter connections to the brain's action-initiating center. And for folks with ADHD, it involves dysfunction in the dopamine and norepinephrine systems. Those are the exact systems that drive motivation. This makes procrastination a near-universal symptom for ADHD brains. It's distinctly different from a character flaw or laziness. It is literally just how the brain is wired.
But here's the catch. While avoiding a task gives you a quick hit of short-term mood repair, the long-term failure of that strategy is just devastating. Beyond the neurological impacts we just looked at, there's a heavy emotional toll, increased anxiety, guilt, constantly beating yourself up. But shockingly, there's a serious physical cost too. Chronic procrastinators literally experience worse cardiovascular health, more digestive problems, and even weaker immune function. That chronic low-level stress from unresolved tasks, it takes a massive, measurable toll on your entire body.
Let's move to Section 4, the perfectionism problem and the fear of failure. We hear people humble brag about being perfectionists all the time, right? They claim they just have incredibly high standards for their work. But the science says something completely different. Perfectionism is not about high standards. It is fundamentally about the fear of failure. Perfectionists procrastinate because not starting acts as a shield. Think about it. If you never start the project, you completely eliminate the risk of producing imperfect work. And more importantly, you eliminate the risk of facing judgment. It's the ultimate emotional avoidance strategy, just masquerading as a virtue. And the antidote to this is honestly surprising. It was discovered by researcher Michael Wohl back in 2010. He found that students who actively forgave themselves for procrastinating on a first exam actually procrastinated less on the second one.
Why? Because guilt and self-criticism just pile on more negative emotions, which makes you want to avoid the next task even more. Self-compassion actually stops the cycle dead in its tracks. Beating yourself up is literally making your procrastination worse, not better. So let's look at Section 5, bridging the action gap, and moving from intention to action. Most of us are completely paralyzed by this false equation. We think step 1 is feel motivated, which naturally leads to step 2, take action. We tell ourselves, well, I'll finally start working once I feel the motivation hit. We literally wait around for inspiration to strike like a bolt of lightning before we even open our laptops. But as we've learned today, waiting for a positive emotion to magically override a negative one, that's a losing game. Because neuroscience completely flips this on its head. The biological reality is that step 1 is actually taking action. Taking the action first, even just a tiny, ridiculous micro step, is what produces the dopamine in step 2, and then that dopamine gives you the motivation and momentum to continue in step 3. You do not need to feel like doing it, you just need to start doing it. The feelings will inevitably follow the action. All right, Section 6, the science-backed solutions and actionable steps. Okay, have you ever heard of the Zeigarnik effect? It states that unfinished tasks create this cognitive tension that takes up mental bandwidth. It's basically the psychological equivalent of having a ridiculously catchy song stuck in your head as an earworm. If you simply start a task, even for just 5 minutes, your brain registers it as unfinished. This activates that cognitive tension and creates a natural nagging pull toward completion. Just opening a document and writing a single sentence is sometimes all it takes to hook your brain into finishing the whole thing. So here are some brilliant tools to bypass your brain's emotional avoidance. First, create if-then plans. Like, if I sit at my desk at 9 a.m., then I will open the spreadsheet before checking emails. This kind of pre-commitment completely removes the friction of making a decision in the moment. Second, lean into the urgency of deadlines. Urgency forcibly shuts down that temporal discounting we talked about earlier. Or third, deliberately practice structured procrastination. This is a concept pioneered by philosopher John Perry. It basically means scheduling lower priority tasks above your most avoided task. Sure, you're procrastinating on the big thing, but you're getting a ton of other useful things done in the process. It's not perfect, but hey, it's way better than nothing. So the absolutely crucial takeaway of this entire explainer is this. Drop the shame. You are not lazy. You are simply human, and your brain is just trying to regulate some deeply uncomfortable emotions. The next time you find yourself avoiding your work, just remember that action precedes motivation. Close this explainer, give yourself a little grace, and go start that dreaded task for just 2 minutes. Because if procrastination is really just an emotional shield, what incredible things could you accomplish if you finally put that shield down?